welcome to Brand Your Passion, the show that helps you turn the thing you love the most into something that people know and love you for. I'm your host, Holly Arnett, the brand coach for creatives, and I'm on a mission to make the world a more creative place, one brand at a time. If you're ready to get more eyes on your work, more dollars in your pocket, and more creativity in your life, you're in the right place. Welcome. Let's brand your passion. Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's episode of Brand Your Passion. This week I'm very, very excited to be joined by a documentary filmmaker, Henry Thong. Welcome to the show, Henry.
Thank you so much for having me, Holly.
Thank you for joining me. I am very excited to hear your story. And to preface for anybody listening, Henry and I were just talking because we actually work together via ConvertKit. We both are involved in like the brand and marketing process in ConvertKit. And so it's really great to be able to selfishly hear Henry's story as part of this process. So I'm excited to hear more about what you do. And I can't wait for others to hear everything about your story. So to kick us off, do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Sure. So my name is Henry. I was born in Malaysia, grew up in Australia, and now I'm living in New York. And I am a documentary filmmaker. So I produce short films, documentaries, and web content about creators, different types of artists, different types of creatives, really anyone who inspires me and whose work that I'm a fan of.
Amazing. I love that we have like a very similar, type of people that we love to work with.
Yeah.
We're all about, talking to creatives, meeting creatives, helping creatives. I love that. And you're obviously a very worldly person too. You've been all around the world, which is very cool. When you were like growing up in Malaysia, were you like creative back then? Have you always kind of identified as creative or felt creative even from a young age?
Yeah, I feel like I have a thread of interest in the creative arts and creative expression myself going back quite some time. I think I can trace it all the way back to my uncle showing me his comic book collection when I was very small. I must have been, I think, 7 or 8 years old because we moved to Australia when I was 9. And I really got into collecting comic books and reading comic books. I always enjoyed drawing. And so those two things fed into each other. And both when I was living in Malaysia and then when we moved to Australia, my house was always covered in pieces of paper, scraps of paper that I had been drawing onto, whether they were like full pieces that I was trying to create or whether they were just doodles and little, drawings that didn't really matter. I was always drawing. So I was always into visual arts and visual creative expression. So I guess it's not a surprise that I ended up going into filmmaking because there are a lot of similarities between the two of them, especially when you compare, shot listing and storyboarding for film to the panels of comic books.
Yeah, I definitely was thinking in my mind like that storyboarding of video. And yeah, it's such a kind of great comparison to comic books in that, it's all about telling those stories through those different shots and the different perspectives and all of that. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love that, that's something that maybe like way back then when you were younger and looking at all these comic books, you might have never thought would lead to video, but then retrospectively you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's funny how everything connects together.
Yeah. All those little things that make you who you are as a creative now is really interesting. And that's why I love asking the question about like, were you creative as a young person? Like, even if it was something completely different, because it so does feed into like what we're interested in now and what we do now. And so, yeah, I love that that's so connected. That's awesome. So since kind of then when you were younger and drawing and doing all of that, what does your journey look like since then? How did you sort of get to video from there?
Yeah, so I guess the first time that I really threw myself into video production and filmmaking was in high school because I remember I was in year 10 in Australia and that was the first year that we could pick elective classes in high school, and I chose media studies because I thought that it would be a class that I could bludge or slack off in. And I almost didn't take it because I was worried about like being in front of the camera. Even to this day, I mean, I'm more comfortable with it now, but I've always felt a little bit uncomfortable with being in front of a camera. So I thought that was going to be part of the course, and I almost didn't join because of that, but I decided to do it anyway. And found that I really, really enjoyed making films. Obviously, there was a lot of theory that was involved in that class, but a big part of our assessment was actually making films as well. And so that hands-on sort of experience working with the cameras, I was very lucky because my school had a media lab, so they had a fair amount of gear and computers and cameras to work with. That exposure really turned me onto filmmaking. And I remember there was a poster up in the classroom, and it was for this film festival that was running for the first time in Adelaide, which is where I'm from in Australia. And it was advertising $1,000 prize if you entered and won. And I was like, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind like winning $1,000. I was like, I don't know, 15, 16. So that, I mean, I guess now that is still a lot of money, but at the time it was like, oh my God, I can't imagine having that much money in my bank account.
Yeah.
So I incorporated that competition into one of the assignments that we had to produce for that class, made this film, entered it into this festival, and was really fortunate enough to win. And that festival took me to the US because they had the festival was founded in the US, and it was the first time that it was done in Australia. So I ended up competing in the US, won in the US as well, made a lot of friends here, kept coming back here, and it sort of all flowed into where I'm at now.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, congratulations to like 15-year-old you for having the like not the bravery, but just being like, yeah, I'm going to enter this competition, see how I go. And that kind of led to so many other great things. That's amazing. Yeah, well done past you. That's awesome. So you just mentioned that you had been coming back to the US and that sort of thing. So is that what led you to ultimately move to, because you live in New York now, right?
Yes. So, I mean, New York has always been a very like special fantasy place for me because
Yeah.
I grew up watching Spider-Man movies,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously, with the comic books as well, it's like they all tie together. So I always, imagined myself visiting here, and
Yeah.
like I couldn't even imagine living here. But the US, I grew up on a lot of American TV and movies, and that's why I don't sound fully Australian, because that's the stuff I was watching when I was a kid was like just Disney Channel all the
Yeah.
time. So when I had a chance to come here to compete in that festival, I just seized that opportunity. I knew I had to come and visit and see it for myself. And because that went well, and because I really enjoyed it and made some friends here, I just kept coming back. Like, I think that festival that I came here for was in my senior year of high school. So that was year 12 at that point. And after I graduated high school, I just decided to do another trip back to the US. And then I just kept coming every year after that. And I didn't have like work. Like here, I just came back to make my own films, and everything that I was doing here was sort of like a self-driven project as part of this Makers Who Inspire series that I was producing. And so it was just excuses to come back to the US. And with every trip, I would come to different cities, ended up coming to New York a bunch of times. And one of the last times I visited before I moved, one of the films that I made, it premiered at Lincoln Center here in New York City. I made a short documentary about a principal dancer at New York City Ballet. And I was also making a film at the time about Ronnie Chang, the comedian who was in Crazy Rich Asians. And that trip went really well, and I like met a lot of cool people, and they said, why don't you just move here? You've got like enough under your belt that you could probably qualify for the visa. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And it worked out. And then I moved here in 2019.
Amazing. I love that, those people who are just like, just come here. You're here all the time already.
I find like New Yorkers and Los Angelinos always say stuff like that. They're like, oh, just come. But then I think they've lived there for so long, they don't realize how difficult it is.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know what Australia is like compared to New Zealand, but I know that in New Zealand there's a lot of sort of like tall poppy syndrome. It's like, don't dream too big. Mm-hmm. Don't dream that you could make it in America or things like that. And if you do, it's kind of like, whoa. So like, yeah, maybe there's a difference that they're just like, oh yeah, just move here, no big deal. But I love that you did in the end.
Yeah. I admire the cultural differences between America and Australia. And I guess it sounds like New Zealand as well. Like there are great things about Australia, but not so great things when it comes to the type of work that I want to make. So I knew I had to come over to the US, and I was lucky enough that it worked out.
Yeah, amazing. And so was it kind of around when you moved over, or once you'd graduated, that you decided that you wanted to make filmmaking your sort of like full-time career, or that was what you wanted to do with your life, or
Yeah,
how did
so
that sort of come about?
that came about during high school. So around the time I entered that film festival and started taking those classes, because up until that point I was obviously doing every other subject at school, because my school was an IB school. I don't know if you're familiar with International Baccalaureate, but it's a different type of diploma, and you have to do like one subject in every subject group. Like there's one humanities and one math and one science and then one arts and one language.
Right.
I was doing all of that to keep my options open. But
Mm-hmm.
because I was making these films and really enjoying them as part of the film classes, and also winning awards in the US and in Australia, I was like, you know what, maybe I'll keep chasing this further down the rabbit hole and see where that goes. So slowly, as I went into senior year in high school, I dropped all of the other subjects. I dropped IB, and by the time I finished high school, I was doing 5 film-related subjects and 1 English. And the school was, because I was a student that had decent grades, and so my principal and my teachers were kind of concerned that I was going in this direction. But with every film class I picked up, I used the assignments for that class to make a new film to enter into a new festival and win a new award. And then the media started making, articles or stories about these, developments in my career. And then the school were like, oh, yeah, well, all right, seems like it's working out. Cool. So I would say that it was around high school that I decided to make this my career, because as soon as I graduated high school, I did apply to a few film schools in Australia, in Adelaide and Melbourne, but I ended up deciding not to go to university at all, and pursued this career as a freelancer, as a contractor, right out of graduation until I moved here to New York. So, yeah, I think that decision was made before I even left high school.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all. I mean, I think I had sort of was very similar. I discovered design at school, and yeah, by the time I left, I was doing design, photography, painting, like all design adjacent topics. And
That's
it
awesome.
was the same, knew exactly that I wanted to go and do design. But incredible that you sort of took the leap and was like, no, I'm not going to go study. I'm not going to go get another job, like a full-time job or anything. I'm just going to dive straight into the freelance life straight out of high school. Do you think that sort of helped you like get to where you are now by just jumping straight in? Because I know obviously people probably expect after high school that you go either get a job or you go to university. Yeah, looking back now, how do you feel about that decision? Obviously, hopefully pretty good.
Yeah, I feel good, but actually, it's funny you bring it up, because now with the benefit of hindsight and being older as well, looking back at that, I'm even moving here to New York, I look at that and I'm like, why did I think I could do that? It's I think for you, you might understand this as well, because it sounds like you had a similar journey. But when you're younger, I guess it feels like you can do anything because you haven't had as much perspective or things to compare yourself to. I think I was kind of, to be honest, a little bit deluded in the thought that I could do this. And also, I'm just a really stubborn person. So I was like, you know what, I'll just make it work. And anytime someone threw like doubt my way, I just use that to fuel myself to keep going.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know whether it's as much of a bravery or courage thing as it is like just self-delusion, but it did work out, and I'm glad it went that way, because a lot of my friends who ended up going to college, to uni, whether they were doing film or doing something else, by the time they graduated, I had already made enough of a name for myself through making many expensive mistakes as a freelancer, figuring it out,
Yeah.
to be a little bit further ahead in my career, and it felt like a bit more of a head start, if if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's very just interesting to hear from different people's experiences, like with or without school. Like a lot of people, ask me or asking online, that sort of thing, like, should I go to design school? Should I go to film school? Should I go to, what should I do when I finish or when I want to start my career? And so it's, just really valuable to hear from somebody like you who just dove straight in. And I love that it was just kind of like, because you believed you could and you were stubborn enough to like make it work. I really appreciate that. Yeah. I like it a lot. And so it sounds like you had started your Makers Who Inspire series, which I want to dive into a little bit now, in high school. Is that right? So tell me a little bit about how that series started.
Not in high school, actually. It was after high school. So the story is I graduated high school. I had been making these films for my classes that were winning awards. And I knew that continuing this sort of path of entering films into film festivals and winning awards was a good way to build my brand and get known for what I was doing. And so I kept making these films, but as I kept making films for festivals, I found that I realized that the types of films that I was making that would get into festivals were not the types of films that I was personally as interested in anymore. Right. So I graduated in 2014, and by 2016, I was in this sort of funk where I was like, what am I doing? Like, I know that this is helping my career to be trying to make films for festivals and entering them into festivals to build my name recognition, but it's not the type of film that I want to make. And so I was sitting one day and thinking, what kinds of films do I enjoy watching, and what would I be interested in watching that hasn't been made or isn't being made in Adelaide at the time that I was living there? And I realized that the stuff that really interests me are the films about artists and their creative processes and how they make work and the experience that they have when they're putting together a body of work or starting their career. And also me being, I don't know how old I was at the time, 2016. I guess I was 20 years old. Yeah, I was 20. I was just like wishing that I could ask for advice from different types of artists that I looked up to, that I was friends with, but make it productive in a way where other people could watch their answers or listen to their answers as well and get the advice for themselves. So I ended up starting to make this little series that ended up becoming Makers Who Inspire by approaching some friends in Adelaide who I knew were artists. I just made short films about them between 2 and 5 minutes long, really ground level, small stuff. And I made it in a documentary format because I do love the documentary genre, but also I was very aware of my limitations and my capabilities. I knew that documentary was cheap to make. I knew I could do it all myself. And being stubborn, I'm a bit of a control freak. I knew, like, if I could just rely on myself to do everything, then I could get it done. So that's why I made all those decisions that ended up becoming Makers Who Inspire. And I just kept putting out the films. Like, I think I made 10 episodes in season 1, 10 episodes in season 2. And that consistency was a good motivation to make the next one, because I was like, well, if I put one out on this week and another one doesn't come out next week, then, I mean, I guess there wasn't really anyone following at the time, so I could have done it. But to keep myself accountable, having this release schedule was a really good incentive. And I made films, more films about people in Adelaide, and then I started branching out to interstate artists. And then I started making films about the Americans that I was coming across here in the US. And with each successive episode, each successive season, I think the profile and the types of artists and creators that I was making films on grew and grew and grew. So I guess that's the quick overview of Makers Who Inspire.
Incredible. I mean, I can really sort of empathize with the going back to what you were saying at the beginning of your answer to the question about the sort of balance between things that have worked in the past and, make you money and doing really well, but then feeling this sort of like misalignment or this burning desire to kind of follow something else and kind of toying with that decision or that direction. It's like a fork in the road sort of thing. And I think a lot of creatives struggle with that balance. I know that I've, worked with freelance artists, for example, who do a lot of client work, but really they just want to spend the time making their own products and their own things. But there's that sort of practical balance between doing the things that are working and making money and successful in the eyes of others, but maybe not fulfilling you as much inside. So I really am thankful that you shared that part of that decision making and that you decided to follow something that you were really passionate about is really, inspiring and great to hear about. And I am curious to hear about, like you were saying, that the profile of the people sort of expanded and, kind of interviewing or filming more prolific people now. Has that just come from like you said, doing the videos consistently and getting that sort of recognition and that reputation for what you do? Like, how have you been able to get some of those bigger people on your series?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think the answer to it kind of will lead into the ways that I built my brand, which I know you wanted to talk about a little bit.
Yeah.
So I feel like for me as a creator in the film industry, I feel like people can be easily divided into one of two different categories. So you have the director, who is very much the artist, if you think about it as like someone who's very creatively focused. And then you've got someone that's more of like a producer who's very organized and on top of the logistics and thinking about the business side of things. I feel like I'm directly in between those two archetypes.
Yeah.
So when I was making the decisions to do my series, I was making the decisions because I was interested in them from a director mindset, of course, because I was fascinated by these people and I was a fan of them and I was wanting to push myself creatively. But also I knew that my producer brain knew that by working with different artists, even the first artists that I worked with in Adelaide, pairing our brands together in that way would be mutually beneficial. So I was happy that I could make films about my friends, but I was also happy that those films could elevate my career and also elevate their career because they hadn't had a film made about them yet. So with how I started to grow the profiles of the types of people that I was making, it was, I think, a combination of two things. It was like proof of concept. The fact that I had made so many up to the point when I had approached the US-based creators that I was trying to profile helped because they could see that, oh, there's a consistency here. He's made films about other artists before. I can see what they look like. But it also helped that I had been very intentional about my networking, which is also a producer side of my brain. And I don't like to say the word networking because it conjures up images of like, I don't know, men in suits exchanging business cards. For me, networking is more like making friends with the people that you're working with, right? So the art community is very, very small, even between Australia and the US, because a lot of the people the first US-based artists that I made films about were actually Australians, but they had been living here for a long time. And because I had made films about people that they knew or friends of their friends, or perhaps even their friends, back in Adelaide, back in Australia, they had already heard from me, they had already heard about me, and they've heard from people who could vouch for me. So that's how I started to like increase the sort of fame and profile of the people who I was making films about.
Yeah, very, very smart. And similar to this podcast, right, it's the same thing. I started with people that I know. And then, when I reached out to you, I was like, hey, you can listen to these episodes of people that you know that have been on the podcast and that kind of thing. So it's definitely all about, like you said, like the consistency and showing that you can do it and it has been done well. And that also there's this like connection of people who can vouch for you or, say that it's worth doing. So that's really smart.
Yeah.
And so other than sort of like you said, like the networking and that consistency, what have been some other ways that you have sort of tried to build your brand or intentionally kind of shape or build your recognition and what people know you for and kind of grown that over time?
Yes, good question. Before we started this interview, I told you I'm not so sure that my visual branding is necessarily the best example, but I feel like I've put a lot of thought into the storytelling side of a brand, in the sense that the way that I've branded myself was by being very intentional about the subject matter of the work that I was making and the genre of the work, for lack of a better word, I guess. So I knew early on, I learned that, especially when you're starting out, it's very beneficial for your career to be known as the person who does this thing or a person who does that thing. So I knew that by making Makers Who Inspire, I was positioning myself to be someone, to be known as someone who makes documentaries, but also who makes documentaries about artists and creators. Because if I was successful in building that brand around myself or for myself, then anytime someone who wanted to work with an artist, or was an artist who wanted to work with a filmmaker, or was a brand who wanted to make a film about an artist, they might think of me or think of my work and end up hiring me to make their project with them. So that was the thinking behind how I built my brand. And I think, does that answer your question? Sorry, I think I might have like lost the plot there a little bit because my mind was going further than my mouth was.
No, that definitely answers the question. And I think it's really great that you thought about that from the beginning. And that's what like I try and, that's what a lot of my content and a lot of what I teach is about, is because when people do think branding, they think about like a logo or the colors or the fonts or the patterns or whatever. And so it's funny that you said, that's not my best thing. And that's fine. And that's what I always say is like, don't worry about those things. Those things are great. If you can do them, that's awesome. But the most important thing to think about is like your brand strategy, which is effectively what you did in saying like, this is kind of the niche. This is what I want to do. This is who I want to do it for. And this is what I'm all about. And as long as that's really clear, then that's how I'm going to get known for doing what I do. And then your work can kind of speak for itself and help to build and grow that brand. So
exactly. Yeah. And for me, it's like a filmmaker, what you're saying relates to me. The way I think about it is like, if you're watching a film, the story is the most important thing, right? You can have like the most amazing VFX, great music, and great cinematography. But if the story isn't there to hold people's attention, then all of those bells and whistles don't really serve anything.
Mm-hmm.
So in the same way with branding, if you know what your core message is, then I think you can build around that. With all the visual elements to, at least that was my hope, to effectively create a brand around and about yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the cool thing as well about being a visual artist, especially, is that your work kind of builds your brand like on its own, sort of, without really having to think about like colors or logos or anything like that, because you have like your style of videography or your style of photography or the like earrings that you make or whatever, sort of build that visual side of your brand anyway. So you sort of have that on your side. So that's awesome. And I would love to hear sort of like, as we're talking about storytelling, obviously that is a huge part of what video does and a huge part of what you do. So I would love to hear your thoughts on sort of why video is so good at doing that, and especially for like building your brand through video. What are your thoughts on video as like a medium for storytelling for creators or for brands?
Oh, so many ideas here. Well, I think you can like trace it all the way back to, was it 1896, right? When the Lumiere brothers, I think they projected the very first film of like a train coming into a station. It was super basic, but people like moving images just sort of capture people's attention in a way that still images or the written word doesn't. And it was true then, and it's still true now. So I feel like video is so effective at building a brand or like getting your message across, because so much can be said in such a short amount of time that can't quite be conveyed in as brief of a piece of work as if it were a still image or a written piece of like a paragraph of text. Video is the closest thing I think that we have at the moment to really translating and transmitting someone's personality and their overall vibe. Because when you watch a video, you can really get a feel for someone's personality, how likable they are, how effective they are at speaking or conveying their message, how likable their brand is, what their brand can do for you. Take away like all of the special VFX and potential, animation and stuff that can be put into a video, which helps. But you strip that all away and you just have someone talking to a camera. That alone is, I think, in my personal opinion, more effective than just audio or just the written word, because you can see someone, you can make eye contact with them, and you'll leave the experience feeling way more connected to what it is that they're trying to tell you. That's why I think video is much more effective. And obviously now the social media companies and brands around the world are tuning into that. Instagram, announced last year that they're pivoting away from still image content to video content now, which is crazy to me still, because I always think of Instagram as a place to share photographs, but clearly it's a sign of the times.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'm a big Instagram person, and I feel like everybody collectively freaked out when they announced that and was like, video. But I love what you said about like connection, and how video is so powerful in creating that, like you said, and that you can get a feel for somebody's personality, you can look into their eyes and sort of connect with them. And I think that that's really powerful, because like it's something that's said online all the time, and I say it all the time, is that people connect with people, and that's why people love like personal brands or whatever you want to call them, and that brands are so much more like injecting personality into their brands. Like, even, I don't know if you've seen like the Duolingo bird on TikTok, like people love that because it's like it's not a person, but it's like a personality behind a brand that otherwise was just like, is just an app, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, like, at the moment, obviously a lot of us are separated from people, we're isolating, we're staying away from other people. And so having that sort of video connection is really important to a lot of us at the moment. So I think, yeah, like you said, video is really powerful in being able to connect us and help us feel like there's people on the other side of the screen or the other side of the world. So I love that about video. What would you say, or what advice do you think you would give to people who maybe are freaking out about having to sort of inject video into their brand, feeling like, oh, I've never done that before, or feel like it's going to take so much production, or I don't know, they're just freaking out about video online. Do you have any sort of like tips or advice or thoughts on how you can sort of use video as a creative?
Yeah, wow, that's a big question, because it's funny, I'm a filmmaker. I make films and video content for my living. And I was still one of the people like you who freaked out when Instagram said that. I'm like, what? I want to share photos. I don't want to make videos to post on social media when I'm doing that for work already. But that being said, it is the more effective way to like get your message across. And I found that the best advice that someone can take for getting into video for the first time is the knowledge that it's easier now than ever. Like the kinds of, it's a very famous saying in the photography world that the best camera is the one that you have on you.
Yeah.
And the cameras that we have on us now are like the most incredible pieces of technology that anyone has had ever before. So the barrier to entry to start making quality content is very, very low. It's the lowest it's ever been, I would say. And we're more media literate now than we ever were. Like you look at everyone who's making stuff on TikTok, it's just so smart the way that they're going about it. Like they're exercising all of these different muscle groups that we were trained to learn to identify in like high school when we were 16, 17 years old. And these are like 11, 12-year-old kids doing all of that in one video. Oh God, I sound like such an old man now, but it's true. Like
back in my day.
Yeah, legit. But like all that to say that everyone is more media literate. So I think it's much easier than you would imagine it to be, because once you get started, you'll find that a lot of that's already within you and a lot of the stuff is already available to you. Another piece of advice I would say is like just embrace the imperfections to begin with and just be yourself, because I see this a lot with visual artists that I have worked with in the past. And I think it might be because visual artists obviously operate in such a visual medium and the art world can be so cliquey, but they always second guess themselves whenever they've got to do a video thing or they need to produce a piece of video content. But the thing that people love to see is vulnerability, because that's what we connect to as humans, right? That human connection. And people love to see the mistakes and see people work through challenges. So if you're just starting out on video for the first time, the advice that I give to like a lot of visual artists is just to lean into those imperfections. It doesn't need to be a perfect video. It's actually more interesting for people to hear you talk about the challenges and to see you grow as well over a course of 1 or 2 or 3 different videos, whether they're on YouTube or whether they're on Instagram or TikTok. That kind of growth is very inspiring for other creators to see. So I would encourage people to lean into those mistakes or imperfections, perceived imperfections.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, no, I think that's brilliant advice. And I can totally relate because I look back on my first like vlogs or the first reels I made and I'm like, oh my God, how embarrassing.
I know, me too.
Just doing that first one, like, is what I needed to be able to get to where I am now, right? Like I can not like super easily, but I can pretty easily like turn on my phone camera and film a reel and it'll take me 5 minutes. Whereas I just needed to do that first one that took quite a bit longer for me to figure it out. And I felt really embarrassed and it's not very good, but to get me to where I am now. So I think that's amazing advice. And I totally agree with what you said about like the tools and things, because I think, yeah, you can so easily overcomplicate things and think, oh, I need to have like a DSLR or whatever. And I used to vlog with like a DSLR and it was so
wow.
like
Casey Neistat style.
yeah, awkward in person, like in public, and B, just huge. And then I switched to my phone because I was like, it's so easy. It's just as good. Well, not just as good, but like it's good enough to upload.
Oh, it can be if you know what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and good enough to like upload a vlog or whatever. So you can totally just pick up your phone camera and go and you're ready and off and running. And I was also going to add that something that I have seen on Instagram or social media that can be a really good tip is like turning an existing piece of content into video to like just get you started instead of trying to think like, how do I create a video? If you have like, say, a checklist as a like graphic on social media, could you like list those things in a video or do them differently on video? So there's a bunch of ways to try and like ease your way into the video life.
Exactly.
Yeah. So to kind of wrap things up here, I would love to hear from you because obviously you have like built your own brand and you've also worked with a lot of other creators who have been, you know, branding their own passion and building their own brand. So this is the big question, but what do you think is sort of the biggest lesson that you have learned about branding your passion that you would love to pass on to somebody else?
Yeah, I think there are 2 parts to this. So part 1, the biggest lesson I learned in the past that I've already lived through at this point is that when you're starting out, in my experience, the most effective way to brand yourself is to get known for doing one specific thing. It doesn't mean that you can't do a whole bunch of things, but it really helps to narrow down onto one genre of film, for example, like I did, or subject matter, like with making films about creators and artists like I did, because that opens the door to other opportunities that help you build your career in that field. So obviously it's important to choose a field or a subject matter or a brand that is something that you're passionate about, because you're only going to get the work that people see from you. But the second part that I've just recently learned, or still am in the process of learning, is that once you've gotten to the stage where you are getting that work, where you are known for that thing, which is where I'm at now, it's okay to start branching out and become and expand your brand into different things. I have yet to figure out how to do that, but I look at some of the artists that I've made films about, especially Poe, who is one of my close friends back in Adelaide. She's known for being a celebrity chef because she was on the very first season of MasterChef. But she was always an artist before she was a chef. And she's written cookbooks and she's a television host and she acts, and even in her art, she doesn't just paint. I've seen works that she's made with bird feathers. It's so incredible to see how she's not tethered to just one thing and she's known for many different things. So I'm in this weird transitionary stage at the moment where I'm realizing that, it's okay to grow beyond the one thing that people have known you for and to start expanding into different areas of interest that you might have on top of the one thing that people know you for. Yeah, I think those are the 2 things that I've learned the most about branding in my short time doing this.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I love that that sort of reflects, well, in my mind, it sort of reflects like back when you were deciding to make your series and you were, you know, doing this thing that had worked, and then just we're thinking, oh, maybe I want to try something else or do something that is like pulling me in this other direction. And it feels like you're kind of going through that cycle again a little bit and being like, well, here I am, here's what I'm doing, and it's working really well, but I'm sort of feeling pulled to like try some new things. So maybe it's like a cyclical thing for you going around. And
I think for everyone, you know,
yeah,
as creative people, we're interested in so many different things. And I think now, I guess the takeaway from that long speech I just gave is just that nowadays everyone wants to put people in boxes, right? Like it's one thing or another. You need to be known for doing this thing or fitting into this archetype. But now more than ever, perhaps it's a good reminder that we are able and free to experiment and try different things and grow beyond the boundaries that we've already built for ourselves.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what creativity is all about, right? Is learning and experimenting and trying new things. And that's what keeps your creativity alive, I feel like, and growing. So yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that advice. And thank you so much for just being here with me and telling us your story. And I think everybody listening is going to find it really, really valuable and really appreciate your story and the things that you've learned along the way. And I'm very, very excited to see what you do decide to do as you figure out what's pulling you and where you want to go. And I'm sure everybody else will be looking out and listening to hear where that goes as well. So do you want to tell the people, let us know where they can find you and what, if there's anything you want to promote at the moment so that, you know, they can keep up to date with you and see what happens going forward?
Yes, for sure. So you can see all of those Makers Who Inspire films that we talked about on YouTube. You can look up Makers Who Inspire or my name, Henry Thong. On Instagram, my handle is HenryZW. If you're in the US, that will be ZW. And the thing that I'm most excited that I'm working on at the moment is the Creator Session series that I make at ConvertKit, which is where I'm working right now. And that's how Holly and I work together too. I would encourage you to go and have a look at those because we've been doing a lot of work with singers and musicians that have been really inspiring to me and a total vibe because I was never into that live music scene. But now after filming musicians and working with them, I kind of want to lean into it more. So go look up Creator Sessions on YouTube as well.
Amazing. And I will make sure that everything is linked down below, and definitely check out those Creator Sessions because every time I'm like designing the graphics for them and whatever, I find a new artist and I hear their story and it's so exciting. And I'm always blown away by like how inspiring they are, and the caliber of creators on Creator Sessions is incredible.
Oh yeah, it's
so
good fun.
It's like next level. It's very cool. So yeah, definitely check those out. But yeah, thank you again, Henry, for joining us, and yeah, can't wait to hear what happens next for you.
Thanks, Holly.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Brand Your Passion and choosing to spend time with me learning all about branding, business, and all things creativity. You can find more episodes just like this one at makerandmoxie.com/podcast. If you like this one, you can tap that subscribe or follow button so that you're notified about each and every new episode. And if you've got a spare second, please leave a review on iTunes or wherever it is that you're listening to this podcast, because I would absolutely 100% love to hear from you. If there were some helpful goodies in this episode for you, it would mean the world to me as well if you could screenshot that podcast player right now, hop on over to Instagram or Twitter and tag us at Maker and Moxie. By subscribing, reviewing, and sharing, you're helping reach more creators just like you, so that together we can make the world a more creative place, one brand at a time. We can't achieve this mission without you, so your support means the absolute world. I will talk to you in the next episode, but until then, keep creating.